Hi everyone, I'm Harsha Perera. I'm representing Monash University, Australia, Ovis Lab, which is operationalizing values in software. So you understand that we are working towards that. And today I'm going to present our paper for RE'2020, which is in the research track, Continual Human Value Analysis in Software Development, a goal model-based approach. As I said, I'm Harsha Perera, and Gunter, Waka, Rifat, Arif, and John are the other authors of the paper. Most of us coming from Monash University. Gunter is from McGill University, Canada, and John recently moved to Data 61. So once you read the title, you know that this is going to be something about human values. But the question is, what are human values? If I ask you the same question, so there could be any of these words could come to your mind: responsibility, loyalty, resourcefulness, acceptance, anything. So one of the perspective is that your values are different to mine. That's true. But are there any universal human values that which can be found in any country, any culture, any society? Actually, researchers have done quite a lot of research in this area, especially in social sciences. So this is one of the most comprehensive and mostly cited model for the human values definition, which is known as Short's theory of basic human values, which was introduced back in 1992. This has 10 human values, which are in black boxes, let's say conformity, security, and power, and so on. So each value has some value items which can measure these particular values. For example, for the power, you can think about social recognition, wealth, authority, so on. So this circular structure has a meaning. So if you take values which sits next to each other, something like power and security, even value items, something like social recognition and sense of belonging. So these values share a common motive. But if you take values from two bipolar directions, something like choosing own goal against obedient, so those are in tension. So in our research, whenever we talk about human values, we tend to come to this model and understand the values and their impact with each other. So why human values are important in a day-to-day life, in a typical society? It is really, really important because it is a part of humans. But how about software? So why we need human values in software? So there are some famous examples about machine bias and facial recognition software unable to recognize black faces, but they recognize white masks as faces. And you know about Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal and Volkswagen. So they install a software which can cheat with smoke emission test. So these are some of the examples, and another example, recent example, one of the British teenagers took her life because her news feed was flooded with self-harming images, which was normalized among any other interest, something like music, something like sports. So these incidents say that human values are really important, and human value breaches can be as bad as deadly. It could cost you billions, but as bad as deadly. So we have done a research, and which is published IEEE 2020 very recently. In here, we have gone through 1,350 research papers which were published in top tier conferences and journals from 2015 to 2018. And surprisingly, as well as unfortunately, only 60% of values, like, they were untouched from this research, and only 16 papers directly relevant to human values. On the other hand, if we remove some of the well-known values, such as, let's say, security and privacy, so this number further down to 10%. So this is something alarming, and it requires some research done on this area so that we can take this message and product or whatever the outcome of our research to the industry, so that we can develop and deliver these value to the broader community. So when we look at the literature, as well as when we do some empirical studies with industry, we found there are several barriers which keep developers embedding human values into software. So one of the main concerns was like explicit consideration of human values throughout the software development life cycle. So values are tend to be taken for granted always. So, but it should be explicitly discussed as well as explicitly documented. Here we are not going to talk about like a software specification or something like that, but it should be documented in a way that can be operationalizing human values throughout the software development life cycle. So there are huge gap, like when we are trying to evaluate human values in SDLC, there are some emerging techniques like Q-SWOT, but very limited in the literature. And one of the most important part is like most of the technique which has been introduced so far, they try to introduce very new emerging techniques to the industry. But the problem is it's a bit hard to adapt to the professionals to very new techniques. So there are lack of using established methods to integrating, tracing and evaluating human values in this area. So having everything in our mind, so we have looked at a pilot study. So this is about personal alarming system that elderly persons or patients normally they could wear a pendant which has a button. Then you can press the button if there is some kind of emergency. We took this case study from literature. It has basic 3 functionalities. An emergency alarm, as I said, it requires a pendant. A daily check-in function, when you have to, using a system installed in your residence, you have to say, okay, you are okay. So by clicking a button or something. And we introduced the registration function because it needs to function as a system to, as a personal alarm system. So it involves this call center. So altogether, we identify 5 stakeholders for this study, which are patients, which we call all the patients as well as elderly persons, and call center, and relatives, emergency services like ambulance services, as well as service provider, the company who provides this service. So altogether 5 stakeholders. So what we did, first we followed the typical requirement engineering and development process for this particular pilot study. So we, as I said, we identified 5 stakeholders. Then we use persona to document value requirements. So because we had to hypothetically imagine these people, these users, so we imagine some of these people and we create persona to document values requirements. So to do that, we use Short's model to think about, okay, what are the most important values for each of these stakeholders. So then we document it using persona. So in a typical or real case studies, you could use any value elicitation techniques such as value sensitive design, user-centered design, or value-based requirement engineering techniques. And then to develop this system, we use model-driven approach. Therefore, we developed goal models to capture their main intentions of the stakeholders. We create a class diagram to understand structural element of the PAS, which is personal alarm system. So we are going to refer it as PAS. And we develop workflows, workflow models. Actually, we develop use case maps in this case for the PAS system. And we create sequence diagram and state machines to understand its behavioral elements of the system. And we developed an initial feature model for the PAS system. So this initial feature model is one of the key component of our work. So let's discuss about in the next slide. So feature model, we used it as a canvas to discuss about design choices. So I would come to that part in a minute. So if you see, this is the initial feature model for the past system. So it has the main system, and we have the functions like key features, registration, emergency call, and daily check-in. It requires base station and a call center. And emergency call require the pendant, and daily check-in, you could think about two different features, like you could postpone the daily check-in if you are visiting children or something. And there are some follow-up missed check-ins, because let's say some patient missed to check in a particular day, call center call back and see whether the patient is okay or not. So this is the main initial feature model. So what we did was, actually we consider this model as our level 0. In the level 1, what we did was, we brainstormed these features to extend this feature model with design choices, because we knew when we explicitly think about values, it opens up our mind and gives us a lot of options to think about how to better deliver these value requirements. Let's take a few examples. Actually, for the level 1, we use our intention models from the models that we developed. We developed quite a lot, but we took the intentional models. So, and then we identified new design choices and alternatives for existing features. So then we label them with the relevant level. So you can see the white ones labeled as level 0 as level 1, because they both exist in these particular two levels. But there are a few new features coming up. For example, we identified the pendant could be badly affect or negatively affect the social recognition of patients, eventually badly affect to the power of patients. So then we thought about, okay, what are the options that we can think about? We can think about a wristband, as well as we can think about home automation systems. So in another example, we identified something like, in the emergency call centers call back to relatives of the patients. Yes, it is important for the security of the patient, but on the other hand, that particular sub-process negatively affect to the freedom of relatives. So to show that impact, we had to take this sub-process as a separate feature. So this was the level 1 value brainstorming extended version of the feature model. Then we took another set of models which contains more detail about these functions, which were use case maps or workflow models in this case. So now you can see how much this diagram expanded, because a lot of details were in use case maps, which open up our mind to different features or different design choices. For example, so it has a rigid, the original case has a rigid time band like 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. to do the daily check-in. So it limit the freedom of the patient. So identifying this scenario, we thought about, why can't we introduce two different options, which could be the default time and the adjustable time. On the other hand, we thought about, okay, patients or elderly people, they love to have some kind of a human interaction. Let's say for the daily check-in, instead of pressing a button, how about you call to the call center and say, hi, how are you? I'm good today. So that is some kind of human interaction daily basis. That is important. So we introduced that option as well. But on the other hand, these features sometimes negatively affect to other stakeholders. For example, to have a daily check-in through call center, you have to allocate more resources to the call center. It affects to the wealth value of the service provider, eventually the power value of the service provider. So likewise, so each of these design choices had a different interaction with different value requirements of different stakeholders. Now you can see the depth of introducing design choices. It can be effect in many directions. So in this scenario, we had several questions in our mind. So how can we document human values and their relationships with features across different stakeholders? And how can we trace human values throughout the software development life cycle? Yes, we can take several set of artifacts. It could be at the very end, it could be some test cases as well. So you can think about across software development life cycle, but you should have a way to trace these human values, and how you can evaluate human values throughout the SDLC, and what are the established technologies and techniques available to do all of these functions. We found goal models as one of the key requirement engineering techniques, which has almost all the capacity to solve almost all the questions we had in our mind. So basically goal models supports the why question. So it is a hierarchy of goals. For example, to maximize the profit, you need to minimize the number of units sold, and maximize the number of units sold and minimize the cost per unit, something like that. So this is a goal hierarchy, and goal models are capable of containing positive, negative impacts. As well as goal models has readily available tools. In this case, we use Jusium NAM tool. So, taking this inspiration from goal models, we actually developed something called value goal models. In the value goal models, what we do is we link human values from different stakeholders with software features or design choices we recently identified. So it actually documents the reasoning as well as it records positive, negative interactions. You can see here for the patient, for the power value, the design options or choices we identified, like emergency call via pendant, it negatively affect to the power of patient. But the home automation as well as wristband, it positively affect this value. So likewise, we design these value goal models for each level. So this is one of the another 3 value goal models. You can see here the same function, like daily check-in adjustable time positively impact the power of patient, but the same function negatively impact the power of service provider, but it also positively impact the benevolence value of service provider. So likewise, we show the effect of design choices to different stakeholders. This is a step towards value trade-off analysis. So at each level, so we do some evaluations. So for example, here we take the patient and 3 values: freedom, independent, and self-respect, and we pick the design choices from the feature model that best suit to the patient's above value. So then we did evaluation at each level, level 0, level 1, and level 2. You can see the numbers. So in the level 1, freedom was like 19% because they only had the pendant as the option. But when we have the wristband and the home automation, it changes 100 to in next 2 levels. So likewise, each design choice affect to different values. The most important part is that we do evaluate values. We do trace values across these levels. That means software development life cycle in a way. And most importantly, design makers have numbers in front of them to do the value trade-off analysis. So they can decide with numbers to back their decisions. So these artifacts could be anything. Let's say in a agile environment, you could think about Epic, or the use case. You can think about stories and use stories, or could be test cases. So it depends on your development methodology, what should be the artifacts of the system. So eventually we demonstrate the concept, and finally we put everything together. So this is our general framework. As I said, it started with the identifying values of stakeholders. Then we develop the initial feature model, and we start our value brainstorming with different set of artifacts. So at each level, you can extend the initial feature model, as well as you can develop value goal models. So you can extend the existing value goal models. Each level you can do some level-wise value evaluations as well. So there were some interesting discussion points. When we go through the software development life cycle, the more details come in. So it opens up the discussion for more value requirements. And the asking why question was really important because it gives the reasoning from feature to values. And value tension and trade-offs were identified and measured as I discussed. And we are not consider this as a silver bullet to change everything, but this is a step towards integrating, tracing, and evaluating human values throughout the software development life cycle. And we are looking forward industry level evaluation as the next step of this study. So these are some of the summary slides of my presentation, and this is our paper. You can go and read the paper, and welcome to contact us for further questions or collaboration. If you have any questions right now, I'm happy to take them now. Thank you very much.